All right, I'm going to try to summarize what we accomplished on Friday in class. And our main goal is we're starting a little section on um, photo editing as far as kind of correcting some blemishes and enhancing like personal photos. So headshots, things like that. So you'll need to find the file on Google Classroom first and download that. And then we're going to go to open. We're going to be using Photopea or Photopea. I'm not sure how you say this. I'm calling it Photopea. So we're going to go to the open option on the file tab, and we're going to open the headshots image. Once you get this in here, we're going to be focused on a group of tools that are found here on the left. And it's this one here that looks like a Band-Aid. So if you click and hold for a second, you can see there's multiple tools found here. These are all related to modifying images and replacing pixels in an effort to remove blemishes and blend certain content. So as we go through these, I'll be explaining how to use them and showing you how to use them. So to get started, we're just going to go ahead and select that first one there. So the spot healing brush tool. And I'm going to zoom in. So to zoom, there's some shortcut keys that you can use. And it allows you to use this tool without switching to the actual zoom tool, which is found towards the bottom of the list of tools there. So I'm going to just temporarily grab the zoom tool by using Control and Spacebar. So now my cursor turns into the zoom tool icon, and I can click to zoom in. The other shortcut that you'll want to be mindful of is the spacebar by itself. That allows you to grab your workspace and move it around if you need to reposition it. All right, so I'm going to focus in on the face here, and before we get started, this tool can be used in a lot of different ways. It's called a spot healing brush tool. So it's designed to heal or remove blemishes, and it can be used in a spot or a single click method or as a brush. So there are settings up here that you'll be familiar with that are brush settings: size, hardness, and then shape of brush. So generally speaking, we will be using it um, in a circular brush pattern. And then the hardness is how hard the edge is. So you may want to play around with this as you're just practicing, just to see the difference. But the obvious thing is the size. So you kind of want to match the size to the blemish area that you're trying to get rid of. So I'm going to try to get rid of this little blemish right here. So it's just a simple one click to get rid of little blemishes around the face. So go ahead and practice. Go around and find some blemishes. Maybe use the hand tool and pan up to the forehead and find some other stuff you can get rid of. Some of these are just freckles, but blemishes, in my opinion, are things that would be temporary on a person. Say they got in an accident, got a scratch on their forehead from their cat or whatever. That would be something that would be temporary that you would want to remove. Also, things like pimples, things like that are there temporarily. They're not permanent facial feature. The other things that you want to be mindful of are freckles, moles, things like that are permanent, that kind of define a person's look. So there's a fine line between a blemish and something that maybe looks like it maybe shouldn't be there, but it's actually part of their face. So just be very careful and mindful of that before you start removing things. You could easily offend somebody if you remove something and then they get offended because they think you think that's ugly on them or for some reason. So there's some ethics involved in this. So just go around and just try your hand at removing some blemishes. We don't know this person, so we're just going to take creative freedom and remove a bunch of stuff. We're not saying she's ugly, we're just saying we want to practice using this tool. All right, so that's one way of using this tool. And while we're at it, I'm going to also say that the way that we're using this tool right now is destructive. So we are actually replacing pixels. We're selecting an area that we want to remove, and Photopea is saying, okay, you want to remove that? I'm going to replace it with similar pattern and color of the surrounding area. And that's a permanent edit on the background layer that we have right now. So the first thing that we want to do is figure out different ways that we can do this non-destructively. The first and easiest thing to do always is to duplicate your layer. And that's something you should do first and foremost. That way you can retain an original. That way, if you need to go back and undo something, you can always go back to the original. The other thing that's useful in having the original is you can toggle off your edits to see the original, to see if your edits are maybe overdone, maybe you've done too much, or if they're on the right track and you're doing a good job. It's just nice to be able to see the before and the after. So right now, we cannot undo the blemish removals that we just made because they were permanent destructive edits. So what we're going to do now is we're going to learn a non-destructive method. So we're going to create a new blank transparent layer. So to create a new layer, there's two ways to do it. One, you could go up to the Layer tab, scroll over New, and select Layer. A quicker way would be to go down to the Layers panel, and down at the bottom, next to the trash can there's a New Layer button. Just click that one time, and now you have a new transparent layer. All right, so on this transparent layer, we're going to use the tool. And let me try, I'm going to actually try to use this as a brush. And now we're going to brush away some of these wrinkles. So you'll see it doesn't matter how many times I use this tool, nothing is happening. That's because right now I'm editing just the transparent layer. There's no pixels on there, so there's nothing to modify. I'm just selecting transparent pixels and replacing them with transparent, so there's nothing there. So to use this tool in the way that I want to, I need to select more than just the top layer. I need to sample additional layers. So what I'm going to do is where it says source, I'm going to use current and below. So now this tool will work. I'm going to go ahead and remove some wrinkles here. So now I'm using this tool as a brush. Instead of a one click, I'm clicking and dragging away and then releasing to remove these wrinkles. So go ahead and play around with that and try to remove some wrinkles. So when you get into this area here, it's a little bit harder because the contrast is greater. But we can still get rid of some of these. All right, so just go ahead and practice that. Now what I want to show you is what we've just created. So we have replaced some pixels, but in a non-destructive way. So we actually did not edit the background copy. We have created new pixels on this transparent layer. So to show those, I'm going to hide the two layers underneath. And now you can see this is the pixel information that has been created by sampling the background as I'm using this tool. So it's kind of weird to see this kind of skin fleshiness. on a transparent layer, but this is actually the tones and the textures that Photopea has used to get rid of the wrinkles. So it's actually creating new pixels that's non-destructive. So if I ever need to remove something, I can simply use the erase tool, which is this tool right here, and erase some of these pixels. If I want to bring back a wrinkle or two, or if I made a mistake and I want to try again, I can just simply erase these pixels and start over again. All right, let's go back to that tool. So we've learned the first two tools in that list. Oh no, this is still the spot healing. So we're going to switch to the healing brush tool. So there's a difference. There's quite a few differences in this tool. The first is, in order to use it, you have to use a modifier key. So if you start to try to use it, it's going to give you the screen tip that says select clone source by holding Alt or the K key and clicking on the image. So I found that there's a few computers that like the Alt key, and then there's others that you have to use the K key. So the Alt key is what works in Photoshop. So if that works for you, I would encourage you to use the Alt key. If that doesn't work, try the K key. So when you use that, you'll see a little crosshair, and this is where you're going to target your basically your painting material. So I'm choosing a paint color and pattern. So I'm going to try to get rid of some of this dark skin by painting over it with some of this lighter skin tone that's found just below the eyelid there. So I'm going to press the Alt key and target that. When I release and move my mouse away, first my mouse disappears so I can't see it, which is never done before. So let me try that again. For some reason it doesn't want, okay. Oh, so now this is again, I just targeted some transparent pixels. So it's going to show up as transparent content. That's why I didn't see anything after I targeted it. So again, I need to switch from current layer to current and below to sample more than just the transparent layers. Okay, so now I should be able to target and then move away, and I can see now that I have picked up that pattern and skin tone. And now I can use it to paint. So as soon as I click to paint, I will get a little cross symbol, and that's going to follow my cursor as I paint across. So the content actually changes as I move away from the original spot. So that's something to keep track of. The content is continually changing. When I release, it tries to blend it in so that the result was not as great as I would want. So I'm going to undo that and try again. And this time I'm going to change a setting on here and do something. I'm going to decrease my hardness to about 50%. So the transition is not so hard. And I'm going to sample again, maybe a little bit lower on the cheek. And then let's go ahead and paint. I'm just going to do one stroke at a time. So it's taking the darker, it's not really lightening it the way I wanted to. It is smoothing it out, but the transition here is a little bit not great. This just shows you how difficult it is to work with skin tones. Our skin is so varied, but in the right ways. So that just gives you an idea of how to use the tool, even though it didn't turn out that great. So you can play around with it. And my goal in this is not necessarily to get you to be perfect the first time you use it, but just to expose you to how the tools can be used and what they do. So just go ahead and practice, try to replace So some of that should have probably done on a different layer, and then I could adjust the opacity so it's not so extreme. If I turn it down a little bit, it just gets rid of some of the darkness but retains the pattern there. All right, so you get the idea. I'm going to illustrate this a little bit better in a more drastic way, how this tool works. Hold on a second. Let's go ahead and pan. I'm going to pan up so I can see more of the forehead. And I'm going to target around the eye here, towards the left-hand side of the eyeball. And I'm going to drag away and just paint on the forehead. You can see what's happening here. As I'm painting, you can see the crosshair on the eyeball move as I move my cursor. So what this is doing is using a pattern, and now it's going to try to replace or place those pixels right where I was painting. That's how the tool works. So the first tool that we were using, the spot healing brush tool, we were relying on Photopea to decide which pattern and tones to use to replace when we clicked. So we didn't have to target anything. It targets whatever tones and patterns it wants to use to replace those pixels. This other tool, we have a little bit more control by selecting exactly which tones we want to use to replace. So I'm going to target here now and try to cover this up. And you can see it's trying to blend everything together, and it's just making it worse. So you want to use this tool usually in a very subtle way, and I'm using it in a very non-subtle way. It's very aggressive. So I just wanted to illustrate what you can do and the general purpose of how you use the tool. All right, let's undo that. The next tool in the list is the patch tool, and this is used to patch an area. So let me go ahead and focus on the nose area here. For some reason it wants to zoom instead of grab the hand tool. So let me zoom in over here. All right, I'm going to try to select the nose ring here. And I'm going to this is a freehand kind of drawing tool. And I'm going to stop right below the nostril there. Kind of cut it off right there. Complete the shape. The way this tool works is you select something and then you move the shape away. And again, we're on a transparent layer, so nothing happened. So what we want to do, this is actually a destructive tool. There's no option to use this on a transparent layer. You have to actually use it on the layer that has pixels. So I have to select the background layer, and let's go ahead and repeat that process. Let's go down to about where the nostril transitions and complete the shape. And then you can move that away to the pattern that you want to replace it with. So if I move this down here, there's teeth that show in there. I'm clicking and holding and then determining what pattern I want to patch this with. So I'm going to choose a pattern that's very close to the nose tones and patterns. So I'm going to just release right there. And I've just replaced those pixels with the pattern that I chose. I'm going to choose select and then deselect. to show my result there. And then if I wanted to get rid of the rest of this, I would make a new selection. So I'm going to select the rest of the nose ring here. And attempt to move this over. So I might need to move it down or up, because moving it over still reveals some of it. So there we go. I'm going to try to deselect and see what I have. All right, so there's some little artifacts in here that it's a little bit noticeable because I know what I did. But if I zoomed out more, it probably wouldn't be as noticeable. And this is where I could use one of these other tools and try to paint a pattern over it that might make it look better. So with a combination of tools, and I zoom out, it looks like that nose ring was never there before. So hopefully you get the idea. I'll go ahead and use this again in a drastic way just to show you what you can do with it. Let's go ahead and make another Cyclops here. I'm actually going to make a patch, like remove one eyeball. Let's go ahead and select this eyeball with the eyebrow as well. So I've made that selection, and I'm going to patch it with some forehead skin here. So there, you've created some kind of monster. But that's what the tool is designed to do, is select an area that you want to patch and then move that pattern, that shape, that outline around until you find the correct pattern you want to use, and then release your mouse. I'm going to undo that step. There we go. The next tool is very similar, but it's actually a move and then replace. So it's going to move from one place to the other. So let's go ahead and start where we left off. Let's go ahead and select this eyeball. This time we're going to select it and move it away. What it's going to do is try to move the eyeball on the forehead and replace or patch the space that I cut out. So it's cutting out and replacing and patching it somewhere else. So it's moving it. So it was like it was never there here, and now it appears up here. So Photopea just randomly selected a pattern to replace it with, and we have some teeth up here because it just grabbed a pattern that was close by. So let's go ahead and undo that. You get an idea. So let's say, let's just practice one more time. I'm going to select the mouth this time. And I'm going to try to just shift it ever so slightly down. Maybe down farther on the chin. And let's see what happens. Okay, well, it tried. So it tried to replace the pixels here and make it look like it never existed there, and then move what I had selected to a different location. So it's like cut and paste and fill in the hole. So that's the content-aware move tool. Now the red eye tool is a very simple tool, and it's designed to remove red eye, which is a common thing that you'll see in photographs with certain lighting. So there obviously there aren't red eyes here on the pupils, But if there were, you would simply use this tool and click, and it would remove the red eye. It's a very simple tool. All right, those are all the tools that I covered in class. Go ahead and undo that. All right, so my goal in this is for you to practice. So go ahead and practice. In class, we also removed the earring over here, and we also used the healing tools to remove some of these wisps of hair. So some of those Band-Aid icon tools. Where were we? Where's that red eye thing? Here we go. So you can also use this to remove these little hair, these wisps of hair, and replace it with background. So a few more things that we did that are important. As I'm working, I'm kind of hearing my computer working hard. So that just reminded me that we should always be saving our work just in case something were to like just go wrong, or a tool doesn't work and you need to refresh the page. Because we are using an online resource, we actually have to download a temporary copy. That's the only way for us to save. So we're going to click on File and Save as a PSD. That's going to download the current version of what we have here, the work that we've accomplished. So if I were to run out of internet, or like a tool stopped working and I needed to refresh the page, or my computer froze or something like that, I won't lose all of the work that I've done. I can always go back to the most recent file that I have saved for this project. So just get in the habit of doing that as we're working on our projects. Just click on that file button and save a current copy. That will be your backup just in case something goes wrong. All right, so we've talked about removing blemishes and some of these healing tools. In class, the other thing that I did is some enhancements. So one of the ways we did that is to zoom into the mouth, and our goal in class was to remove some of the yellow tones in the teeth. This person has very good teeth, so there's not a lot of yellowing, but there is, and that happens with age. It's a natural thing. But if you wanted to remove the yellow tones from teeth, you would first have to select them. We talked a lot about the different selection tools in Photopea. They're a little bit different than Photoshop. This first one is object selection. This is designed to select a specific object by creating a window around that object. So say I wanted to select this tooth. And you want to target the object with the cross in the center. So you're drawing a rectangle, including the object, and then the object should be in the center that I'm going to release. And it's going to try to select that object. And it did a pretty decent job, but it didn't really find an edge. So it's going to look for the edge of that object and try to select it for you. It's a pretty neat tool. It doesn't always work great, but it is something. It worked a lot better over here for this earring. So see, with one little movement, I can have an object selected if it has a pretty clear edge. So that is a new tool that isn't in Photoshop that I found really useful. This is a very familiar one, the Quick Select tool. And in Photopea, this does not work the same way. So we spent a lot of time trying to use this tool, which is one that we would normally use a lot in Photoshop. But in Photopea, it really, if you click one time, it selects the farthest out edge, assuming you want to select this entire object. Well, that's not the case. So now you have to work from the outside in by removing things that you've selected. So I'd have to hold the Alt key in and then move in towards the center until I remove enough stuff. And now I'm focused on the teeth. Then I would zoom in and try to remove the stuff I don't want with the Alt key. and then switch back to the add to selection by releasing the Alt key and try to select more. So you can see this tool is pretty frustrating to use in Photopea. I have now a pretty decent selection of these teeth, but to try to select any more, and I'm going to start selecting more of the mouth and the cheek and then eventually the head. So we actually decided to use a different tool that we've never used in class before. So to do this, we have to switch to the brush tool. And we need to make sure that our color scheme for our foreground and background is set to the default, which if you click on this uppercase D, it will reset it to the default. And now we're going to use what's called this quick mask mode. So I already had a selection. I need to go ahead and deselect. Let's go ahead and get out of quick select mode. So we need to start with no selection. So click on the tool again until you get rid of that, and then go to select and deselect. Now you want to still be in quick mask mode, so I'm going to select that. And now when I use this, I'm on a brush tool, and I'm using my brush settings. So size and hardness does matter. And I'm going to be painting on this actually a deselect window. So I'm painting with black. You can see that in the default color scheme, black is the foreground color. So I'm going to do this rather quickly just to show you how this works. And we did this quickly in class as well. And don't worry if you paint outside the lines. We're just trying to get a general effect going on here. So I'm selecting all these teeth. Actually, I'm deselecting all these teeth by painting them this reddish color. Then to make my selection, I'm going to click on that quick mask mode tool. Whoops, there we go. And that becomes now a selection. I'm going to zoom out just to show you that what is actually selected is everything except for the teeth. So what I painted, if I create a mask right now, is going to be black. So I'm going to go ahead and create a mask. Whoops. I double clicked somehow. So I have now where I had painted is actually not going to be affected. So I don't want that to be the case. I wanted the opposite. So I'm going to Control Z to undo that step of creating a mask. And before I do anything, I want to invert this selection. So instead of everything except for the teeth being selected, I'm going to have just the teeth selected. So I'm going to select the inverse. So now just the teeth are selected. And I'm going to make an adjustment layer. So the adjustment layers aren't found where they are in Photoshop. They'd normally be just above the layers panel. So in Photopea, there's a list of them that you can find in the layers tab. Find adjustment layers, and then there's a list here that you should be familiar with some of these. But there's also a button in the layers, just below the layers panel. They have the effects button, and then to the right of that is a new adjustment layer. So you'll find the list here. We want to select hue saturation. So now I want to make sure that this is going to adjust the correct thing by just doing something drastic. Let's go ahead and turn down the lightness. Okay, yeah. So it's doing what we want to have done. So what we've done is we've created a mask because that was selected when we selected the adjustment layer, applied that mask. Now we can deselect because we're done with that selection. Now we're going to play around with the settings here. First thing I want to do is focus on the color that I want to remove. So in most cases, it would be yellowing of the teeth. So I'm going to select yellow, and then I'm going to desaturate. Actually, let's go ahead and saturate it. Let's turn it all the way up, just to see what is actually going to be affected by this adjustment. So I've increased the yellows, and these are the areas of the teeth that have that tone of color. So now that I know what I'm going to be adjusting, I'm going to just turn it down to remove that hue of color. So just the yellows are disappearing. So now I'm going to make an overall adjustment. So I want to switch back to the master color, and I'm going to turn up the lightness just to make the teeth a little bit more bright. So I don't want to go way too far. I just want to make a subtle adjustment to brighten the teeth overall. There we go. That looks good. So now I can toggle the before and after by clicking on the eyeball, just to see what my change does. And if it looks too drastic, you can adjust the settings. If it looks like you could do it a little bit more, you could try to bump it up a little bit. So we did a very similar thing to the eyeballs here. If you zoom into the eyes, this time we want to make sure, I just got that warning, this layer is not adjustable. So I want to make sure that I'm on the background layer again. And I'm going to now use the lasso tool to select the whites of the eyes. So this is just a freehand selection here. And if I release and try to make another selection, it's going to get rid of my first selection. So we want to switch to what would be add to selection in Photoshop, and in this it's unite. So we want to unite all of our selections. We want to make additional selections. So I'm going to go ahead and try to select the whites of the eyes here. So again, I'm just doing this rather quickly. Whoops, I got rid of my other selection. What happened? All right, so I have all of these selected. I'm going to apply another hue saturation adjustment layer. So I'm going to go to the adjustment layers button there, click on hue saturation. And this time I'm going to just desaturate everything, so I don't want any color information in there at all. So this would remove any redness or yellowing of the eyes. And then I'm also going to increase the lightness. So you don't want to go way too crazy vampire-y. Just a little bit will do. And then I'm going to deselect so I can see better how that blends in. And then I'm going to zoom out as well. Just to make sure the adjustment looks natural. And I can also do a before and after, clicking on the eyeball. So if I ever need to adjust one of these again, or if I want to close this, I can click on the PRO, which is the properties. So that panel will stay there if I ever need to get to it again. So I could select the other hue saturation and click on those properties and adjust those if I wanted to for the teeth. So that's kind of how you use the adjustment layer properties. And that's pretty much all we went over in class. So hopefully this has been informative, and we're going to continue this theme in our next class and do some more photo editing and blemish removal and stuff like that. So I would like you to save this and turn it in. There is an assignment in Google Classroom. So make sure you click on File, save as PSD, and then upload that to Google Classroom just to show me that you were following along and that you have this knowledge now.